Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! The relentless pounding on the door echoed through the apartment, jolting Mike into instant panic. He dashed around the room like a caged animal, his hands raking through his disheveled hair. His voice betrayed his rising anxiety. "Oh God! They're here! Way before schedule! Duncan, we weren't prepared for this!" Duncan, a picture of calm in contrast to Mike's disarray, observed his friend with a complicated expression. There was a hint of mirth in his eyes, yet underlying it was a genuine trace of worry.
"Breathe, Mike,"
he said soothingly.
"You're not the one whose parents are about to discover their son's been lying about having a girlfriend for the past 6 months.
Another knock, more insistent this time. Mike's eyes widened in panic. Duncan stood up, straightening his shirt.
"All right, showtime. You remember the plan?"
Mike nodded, taking a deep breath.
Yeah. You're Faith, my girlfriend of 3 months. We met at a coffee shop. You work in marketing. And you owe me big time for this,"
Duncan added with a smirk. As Mike opened the door, Duncan slipped into the bedroom. He'd prepared everything earlier. The dress, the shoes, the wig. It wasn't the first time he'd cross-dressed, but it was certainly the most high-stakes situation. Duncan shed his masculine clothes, carefully pulling on the navy blue cocktail dress. It hugged his body in a way that was surprisingly flattering. He slipped his feet into the nude heels, wobbling slightly as he found his balance. The brunette wig was next, styled in loose curls that framed his face. Duncan adjusted it carefully, making sure it looked natural. He'd forgone heavy makeup, opting for a more subtle look that wouldn't arouse suspicion. In the living room, he could hear Mike's strained voice. "Mom, Dad, it's great to see you. I wasn't expecting you so early." Duncan took a deep breath, studying his reflection in the full-length mirror. The person staring back at him was a stranger, a beautiful, confident woman named Faith. He straightened his shoulders, practiced his most winning smile, and stepped out of the bedroom.
"And this is my girlfriend, Faith,"
Mike was saying as Duncan entered the room. All eyes turned to him, and for a moment, Duncan felt a flutter of panic. But then he smiled, extending his hand to Mike's mother. "It's so wonderful to finally meet you both. Mike's told me so much about you." Mike's mother beamed, clasping Duncan's hand warmly. "Oh, Faith, we're delighted to meet you too. Mike's been very secretive about you, you know." "Has he now?" Duncan cast a playful glance at Mike, who looked like he might pass out at any moment. "Well, I hope I live up to expectations." Mike's father, a stern-looking man with graying hair, nodded approvingly.
"You certainly seem to, young lady. Tell us, how did you two meet?"
As Duncan launched into the fabricated story about their coffee shop encounter, he felt a strange sense of ease wash over him. The nerves that had been jangling just moments before melted away, replaced by a quiet confidence. The evening progressed smoothly, with Duncan, or rather Faith, charming Mike's parents at every turn. He laughed at their jokes, asked thoughtful questions about their lives, and even managed to bluff his way through a conversation about marketing trends. As they sat down to dinner, Duncan couldn't help but notice the way Mike's mother kept smiling at him. "Faith, dear, I must say, that dress is absolutely stunning on you. Navy blue is definitely your color." Duncan smiled, smoothing the fabric over his lap. "Thank you so much. I do love this dress." It wasn't a lie. The fabric felt luxurious against his skin, and the cut of the dress made him feel elegant in a way he'd never experienced before. Mike's father chimed in.
And your hair is lovely. Is that your natural color?
Duncan's hand instinctively went to the auburn wig.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
As the conversation flowed, Duncan found himself relaxing more and more into the role of Faith. He crossed his legs demurely, gesticulated with graceful hand movements, and even adopted a slightly higher pitch to his voice. Mike, for his part, seemed to be relaxing as well. He played the part of the doting boyfriend, occasionally placing his hand over Duncan's or shooting him fond glances. After dinner, as they moved to the living room for coffee, Mike's mother leaned in conspiratorially.
Faith, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I'm so glad Mike's found someone like you. We were starting to worry about him, you know.
Duncan raised an eyebrow, genuinely curious.
Oh? How so?
She lowered her voice further.
Well, he's always been so focused on his career. We were afraid he might never settle down, but seeing him with you...
She smiled warmly. It's clear how happy you make him. A strange feeling welled up in Duncan's chest, a mix of pride, affection, and something else he couldn't quite name. He glanced over at Mike, who was deep in conversation with his father about sports.
He makes me very happy too,
Duncan said softly, surprised by how true the words felt. As the evening drew to a close, Mike's parents prepared to leave. His mother pulled Duncan into a warm hug. It was wonderful meeting you, Faith. We hope to see much more of you. Duncan hugged her back, feeling a lump form in his throat.
Likewise. Thank you for such a lovely evening.
Mike's father shook his hand firmly.
Take care of our boy, Faith.
Duncan nodded, feeling the weight of the man's words.
I will, sir. You can count on that.
As soon as the door closed behind Mike's parents, both men let out a long breath.
We did it,
Mike said, disbelief coloring his voice.
They bought it. They actually bought it.
Duncan laughed, kicking off the heels with a groan of relief.
Of course they did. I'm an excellent actress, remember?
Mike collapsed onto the couch, shaking his head.
I can't believe it. They loved you, man. They loved Faith.
Duncan sat down beside him, careful not to wrinkle the dress.
What can I say? I'm a natural charmer.
They laughed together, the tension of the evening finally dissipating. But as the laughter faded, Duncan felt a strange melancholy settle over him.
You okay?
Mike asked, noticing the change in his friend's demeanor. Duncan nodded slowly.
Yeah, I'm fine. It's just weird, you know? Being someone else for an entire evening.
Mike studied him for a moment.
But you seemed so comfortable. There were times I almost forgot it was you under there.
Duncan stood up, moving to the mirror hanging in the hallway. He stared at his reflection, the auburn curls framing his face, the subtle makeup enhancing his features, the navy blue dress hugging his curves.
That's the thing,
he said softly.
I was comfortable, more comfortable than I've felt in a long time.
Mike joined him at the mirror, concern etched on his face.
What are you saying, Duncan?
Duncan shook his head, unable to articulate the swirl of emotions inside him.
I don't know. It's confusing. I've never really thought about this.
He gestured to his feminine appearance.
But tonight, being Faith, it felt right somehow.
Mike placed a hand on his friend's shoulder.
Hey, whatever you're feeling, it's okay. You know that, right?
Duncan nodded, grateful for his friend's support.
Yeah, I know. I just need some time to process all this.
As Duncan changed back into his regular clothes, he couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted within him. The comfort he'd felt as Faith lingered, like a warm glow in his chest. Over the next few weeks, Duncan found himself thinking about that evening more and more. He'd catch himself admiring women's clothing in store windows, imagining how they'd look on him. He started paying more attention to the way women moved, spoke, carried themselves. One afternoon, unable to resist any longer, he found himself in a small boutique on the outskirts of town. The saleswoman, a kind-faced older lady, approached him with a smile. "Can I help you find something, dear?" Duncan hesitated, his heart racing. "I'm looking for a dress for myself." The woman's smile never faltered. "Of course, honey. Any particular style or color in mind?" Relief washed over him. "Something in navy blue, maybe?" As he tried on dress after dress, Duncan felt that same sense of rightness he'd experienced as Faith. When he finally settled on a simple, elegant navy blue wrap dress, the saleswoman beamed at him. "You look wonderful, dear. That color really brings out your eyes." Duncan smiled, twirling in front of the mirror. "Thank you. I feel wonderful." That evening, he called Mike. "Hey, can you come over? There's something I need to talk to you about." When Mike arrived, he found Duncan pacing nervously in the living room. "What's going on, man? You sounded pretty serious on the phone." Duncan took a deep breath. "Remember that night with your parents, when I dressed up as Faith?" Mike nodded, a look of understanding dawning on his face. "Yeah, of course. You've been different ever since then." "I have," Duncan agreed. "And I think I know why." He disappeared into the bedroom, returning a moment later wearing the navy blue wrap dress. Mike's eyes widened, but he didn't say anything, waiting for his friend to continue. Duncan sat down, smoothing the dress over his knees. "I can't stop thinking about how I felt that night, how right it felt to be Faith. And I've realized, I think this is who I really am." Mike nodded slowly. "You mean, you want to be a woman?" "I think I've always been a woman," Duncan said softly. "I just didn't know it until now." Mike was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Then he stood up and pulled Duncan into a tight hug. "Then, I'm glad you finally figured it out. And I'm here for you, whatever you need." Duncan, or rather Faith, as she now thought of herself, felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Over the next few months, Faith began the process of transitioning. She started hormone therapy, grew out her auburn hair, and gradually replaced her entire wardrobe. The navy blue dress remained a favorite, a reminder of the night that had changed everything. As she became more comfortable in her true identity, Faith's confidence blossomed. She threw herself into her work, earning a promotion at the marketing firm where she'd pretended to work that fateful night. One sunny afternoon, as Faith was leaving a coffee shop, the very one where she and Mike had supposedly met, she quite literally ran into someone. Her coffee splashed onto the sidewalk, narrowly missing her navy blue pencil skirt. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry!" a deep voice exclaimed. Faith looked up to see a tall, handsome man with kind eyes looking at her with concern. "It's okay," she assured him. "No harm done." The man insisted on buying her a new coffee, and as they chatted, Faith felt a spark of connection. His name was David, and he was a graphic designer who'd just moved to the city. As they parted ways, David hesitated. "I know this might be forward, but Would you like to have dinner sometime? Faith smiled, a warm feeling spreading through her chest. I'd love to. That evening, as she got ready for her date, Faith found herself reaching for the navy blue wrap dress, the first piece of women's clothing she'd ever bought for herself. As she smoothed it over her curves, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. The woman who looked back at her was confident, beautiful, and above all, authentic. Faith smiled at her reflection, marveling at how far she'd come from that night of pretending to be Mike's girlfriend. As she left her apartment, Faith sent a quick text to Mike. Remember how this all started? Well, I've got a date tonight. Wish me luck. Mike's reply came almost instantly.
No luck needed. Just be your amazing self. Love you, sis.
Faith stepped out into the evening, her heels clicking confidently on the pavement. She was no longer pretending to be someone else. She was finally, truly herself, and she couldn't wait to see what the future held. As Faith approached the restaurant, she spotted David waiting outside. He looked up, his face breaking into a warm smile as he saw her.
Wow,
he said as she drew near. You look absolutely stunning. Faith felt a blush creep up her cheeks. Thank you, she said, smoothing her hands over the navy blue fabric of her dress. This is actually a pretty special dress to me. David's eyebrows rose with interest. Oh? How so? For a moment, Faith hesitated. Should she tell him? It was only their first date after all, but something about David's open, genuine expression made her feel safe. Well, she began as they were led to their table. It's kind of a long story, but the short version is, this dress represents the beginning of my journey to becoming who I am today. David listened intently as Faith recounted the story of that night with Mike's parents and her subsequent realization about her true identity. As she spoke, she watched his face carefully, looking for any sign of discomfort or judgment, but all she saw was warmth and understanding. When she finished, David reached across the table and gently took her hand. Thank you for sharing that with me, Faith. It must have taken a lot of courage to embrace your true self like that. Faith felt a wave of relief wash over her. You're not put off? David shook his head emphatically.
Not at all. If anything, I'm even more impressed by you. It takes incredible strength to be true to yourself, especially when it means challenging societal norms.
As they continued their dinner, the conversation flowed easily. Faith found herself laughing more than she had in a long time, captivated by David's wit and charm. He told her about his work as a graphic designer, his love for abstract art, and his dream of one day opening his own studio.
What about you?
He asked, his eyes twinkling with genuine interest. What are your dreams? Faith took a sip of her wine, considering the question. You know, for a long time, I think my biggest dream was just to feel comfortable in my own skin. And now that I've achieved that... She paused, a slow smile spreading across her face. I think I want to help others do the same. Maybe through motivational speaking, or writing a book about my experiences. David nodded enthusiastically.
That's amazing, Faith. I bet you could help a lot of people.
As the evening drew to a close, neither of them seemed eager for it to end. They lingered over dessert, then coffee, talking and laughing until the restaurant staff began giving them pointed looks. Finally, they stood to leave. Outside, the night air was cool and crisp. David turned to Faith, a mix of hope and nervousness in his eyes.
I had a really great time tonight, Faith. I'd love to see you again if you're interested.
Faith felt her heart flutter. I'd like that very much, she said softly.
David's face lit up. He leaned in slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away if she wanted to. But Faith found herself leaning in too, until their lips met in a gentle, sweet kiss. As they parted, both slightly breathless, Faith couldn't help but smile. This, she realized, was what it felt like to be truly, completely herself, and to be accepted and appreciated for who she was. Over the next few months, Faith and David's relationship blossomed. He was endlessly supportive of her journey, accompanying her to LGBTQ+ events, and listening attentively when she talked about her experiences. One evening, as they cuddled on the couch in Faith's apartment, David turned to her with a serious expression. "Faith, there's something I've been wanting to ask you." Faith felt a momentary flutter of anxiety.
What is it?
David took a deep breath. Well, you know how I've been talking about opening my own design studio? I've finally saved up enough to do it. But I'd like to make it more than just a design studio. I was thinking we could incorporate a community space, maybe offer workshops and support groups for LGBTQ+ individuals. Faith's eyes widened.
David, that's an incredible idea!
He smiled, looking relieved. I'm glad you think so. Because, well, I was hoping you might want to be part of it. Your idea about motivational speaking, we could make that a regular thing at the studio, and maybe you could lead some of the support groups. Faith felt tears welling up in her eyes.
Are you serious? David, it would be a dream come true.
David pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. You've inspired me so much, Faith. Your strength, your authenticity. I want to help create a space where others can find that too. As they began planning their new venture, Faith felt a sense of purpose she'd never experienced before. She threw herself into researching, networking, and developing programs that could help others on their journeys of self-discovery and acceptance. The day the studio opened, Faith stood beside David, greeting their first visitors. She was wearing her favorite navy blue dress, the one that had started it all. As she looked around at the diverse group of people entering the space, all seeking connection and understanding, she felt a profound sense of rightness. This, she realized, was where she was meant to be. Not just as a woman, but as an advocate, a friend, a beacon of hope for others who might be struggling with their identity. As the day wore on, Faith found herself in conversation with a young person who reminded her so much of herself in those early days of questioning. The individual, barely out of their teens, looked at Faith with a mix of awe and uncertainty.
How did you know?
They asked, hesitantly.
That you were... you?
Faith smiled gently.
It wasn't a sudden realization, she explained. It was more like slowly waking up to something that had always been there. And once I acknowledged it, everything just felt right.
The young person nodded slowly, their eyes filling with tears. I think I might be like you, but I'm scared. Faith reached out, gently squeezing their hand. It's okay to be scared, but I want you to know that you're not alone. We're here for you, whatever you need.
As the young person broke down in tears of relief, Faith held them close, remembering her own journey. She caught David's eye across the room, and he gave her a warm, proud smile. In that moment, Faith knew that this, helping others find their truth, their authenticity, was her true calling, and she was profoundly grateful for every step of her journey that had led her here. As the studio grew and flourished, so did Faith's confidence and sense of purpose. She began traveling to speak at conferences, sharing her story and advocating for greater understanding and acceptance of transgender individuals. One day, as she was preparing for a particularly important speech, she found herself once again standing in front of the mirror, smoothing down her favorite navy blue dress. But this time, the woman who looked back at her wasn't questioning or uncertain. She was strong, confident, and ready to change the world. Faith smiled at her reflection, thinking back to that night when she'd first donned a dress to help out her best friend. She could never have imagined then where that simple act would lead her. But now, she wouldn't change a single step of her journey. As she left for the conference, Faith sent a quick text to Mike. "About to give the biggest speech of my career, wearing the navy blue dress for luck. Love you, bro." Mike's response came quickly. "Knock 'em dead, sis. You've got this. So proud of you." Faith stepped out into the sunshine, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. She was Faith, she was proud, and she was finally, truly home in her own skin.
Thanks for watching, my girlies. Be sure to check out Patreon for more.